bookish friends, welcome back to Coffee Over Apples. My name is Steph. I've got about 6 books that I'm going to talk to you about. So here's the thing, I realized that I don't do as many wrap-ups as I probably should. I tend to forget about actually following up and saying, hey, here are the books that I read recently, and instead I'll just like pop up random book reviews. Remember that thing I said I was going to read? I did, and here's a review. So I figured, let me just kind of talk to you about some of the books that I have read this year and totally forgot to mention that I did read them.
It could change the world.
Unless you're following me over on TikTok, then you may have seen that I posted like mini reviews of these books. Okay, let's talk about Unwieldy Creatures by Addie, Brook, Tsai. This was a sci-fi book club read, part of the INTERSTELLAR Book Club, my book club that I read, link below. I did like this one. I had a couple criticisms of it. I had a couple things that I think could have been done better, but ultimately I did really like this, and I would recommend this to a lot of people. I think, did I give it 4 stars? I might have given it 4 stars. I'm not entirely sure because I read this a little while ago. It is a Frankenstein retelling. It is sapphic. It is sad. It's really sad. I got really sad multiple times. My gripes really came towards the end, simply because at a certain point, the idea of a story hammering something just home a little too hard, right? But I'll get to that in a second. Our main character is trans. Our main character starts off with them as a young person, and actually I think it starts off with their parents meeting. They are a biracial trans person. They ultimately become Frankenstein. What they're interested in is a development in vitro fertilization science, so that they want to be able for 2 women to have a baby without the necessity of having a man involved. This is a result of trauma that they've experienced, right? So therefore that leads them to pursuing science, and therefore it becomes a Frankenstein retelling. That in and of itself, the beginning of the story, I absolutely adored. It was hard hitting. It gave me all the emotions, this person's experience, talking about the trans experience, all of those things. Cannot recommend enough. It's just towards the end where it started to become more of a one-for-one retelling of Frankenstein, where I would have liked this to be more of, it's following the general storyline of Frankenstein, but certain events are transpiring differently from the original story for the sake of the themes that are being explored here, right? I'd rather it have like sprinklings of Frankenstein or leading up to the overall theme of Frankenstein rather than being an exact retelling, which to me I think happened like about 50% of the way through to the end. It just became one for one. So that's the only thing that I really would have done differently. Also, there's like one particular scene, again, I think this is going back to the theme of this video, is there's just one particular scene that really took me out of the story, because when I heard it, I was listening to it on audio and I had to re-listen to that scene probably 5 times, thinking to myself, well, that just doesn't make sense for this character. The choice that they made felt like it completely undermined everything that we've done up until this point. And so because that, I just couldn't let it go. There's something that I've definitely learned about myself in the past, this year, I guess in 2024 as a reader, is that when I see an inconsistency and when I see something that's just a missed opportunity, I can't let it go. I can't. It just bothers me. I don't know if it's the artist in me. I don't know if it's the creative director in me, but I'm just like, oh, what a waste. Regardless, it's still a really good book. I highly suggest that people do pick it up, and I would recommend this probably in like a future horror sci-fi video. A book that's gonna be on my least favorite books of the year list. I read this a while ago. Annie bought it. I posted a review about it on Goodreads, and it's been so long that I really don't know if I'm going to be able to give you like a really good quality individual book review for this, so I'm just going to include it here. Annie Bot is about a robot cyborg named Annie, who is a product of a company. This is a relatively new company that makes companion robots for the ultra wealthy. Her owner, Doug, is a super rich bachelor guy who has Annie made after, I think it's his ex-wife, or at least his ex, right? Made to kind of look like her. Okay, well, here's my first gripe. His ex was black, and he makes her a white version of his ex. I think the point of that really was, I'm going to add spoilers here because honestly, I don't care about this book. I think the point of that really was to just show how disgustingly racist Doug is, which is like, in and of itself, okay, if we're going to come back to it. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to have them do something so fucked up, bring us back. Make that become a relevant part of the story. And that doesn't. So it just felt like a really weird thing to throw in there because there were so many other scenes in which we saw that Doug was just a horrible person. Like, someone needs to throw the man out in the trash. So because we had so many other things where he did really horrible things and I just wanted to like kick him in the face, we didn't necessarily need that scene, but it was a choice that was made. So Annie is experiencing domestic abuse, so big trigger warning for domestic abuse in this book. Big trigger warning for like marital R, drop that there. Big warning for SA, all of those things. But the point is that Annie is constantly getting upgraded and her programming is set. Her sole purpose is to please him. And being that she is experiencing domestic violence, he is putting her in situations that are just paradoxes, asking her to take care of him in a certain way and getting mad at her when she's not able to predict what he wants her to do. Yep, sounds like your typical scumbag. But then there's also other things that happen in the story which cause Annie to go through different complexes and want to do research in order to upgrade her programming. And with that comes a certain level of wisdom through her experiences. And she's starting to question, what is my purpose in life, right? I loved Annie as a character. There are conversations in here about couples therapy. Even in the way that the couples therapy was handled, I didn't understand the choices that the author made because I thought this could have been conversation for a lot other things regarding domestic violence, or the way that therapy is like supposed to be helpful for couples to either work through their feelings or produce a red flag that domestic violence is going on, but like none of that happened. And the therapist also made a really weird comment about being a professional in like queer and non-binary couple counseling, but like that wasn't relevant for some reason. It was a lot. It was a lot that was going on. But at the end of the day, I feel like I wasn't satisfied with the ending of this book. I feel like there could have been so much more done here, especially because Annie was in a very particular situation in which the result of her relationship with her owner affected so many other victims who were in a similar situation, but we went nowhere with it. That's my biggest gripe, is like bringing up things that just didn't seem relevant, or things just not being followed through or going nowhere. Just ticked all the boxes of things that really upset me. An author who has characters say things and do things and then goes nowhere with it because it doesn't seem relevant to the story. Like, why are we here? Can we hire an editor? Let's talk about this one. I actually have a vlog that I made a while ago that I keep forgetting to edit, but a vlog will come out for this eventually. This is Where They Burn Books, They Also Burn People. I did tab some things and then I kind of gave up. And me usually giving up on tabbing is a signal of I'm not having the greatest time. Part of me wanted to love this, and then part of me got frustrated with this. So here is generally what this is about. This is actually 2 books combined into one. It's following a friar in 1500s in the Yucatan. He is part of the Spanish missionaries that are coming over to Central and South America, building missions and taking over the land for the Spanish crown from the Mayans and the indigenous peoples that are present. So there's a lot of really horrible things history-wise that happen in here. It is an adult horror. So if you can just think of all of the horrible things like Spanish Inquisition things that happened during that time, if you're familiar with that history, it's really sad. It's really messed up. And that part of the story, I did not have a problem with. I actually really liked reading about that story more than reading about the second story, which is set more in the contemporary. Essentially, in the second story, we're following a not so young man. I guess maybe he's in his early 20s. He has some sort of mental disability, which isn't really necessarily disclosed on page. A Latine guy who is living at home with his mom. He works a menial job at a factory. He can only kind of manage to do very specific things if he's told directly, hey, do this thing. His critical thinking skills are definitely not where they need to be for his age. What he's kind of suffering from is this generational trauma. It's very clear, I think his name is Cortez. It's very clear that he is a descendant from the Spaniards and the indigenous people and all of those things that were happening in the other timeline. We're seeing the effects of what happens when someone's culture is ravaged and there's like this forced assimilation that happens. I feel like that's one of the major themes in both stories, right? I can't even list all the trigger warnings on here, but it's like, dude, Spanish Inquisition. The friar very clearly, as expected, is a horrible person, making justifications for all of the things, horrible things that he does, and saying that it is the will of God because he thought of it and he is an embodiment of God. So like, of course, God, this is God's will. So that part of the story was fine. Here's the thing that kind of really pulled me out of this. I have learned about my particular reading taste that there is something that happens when if I'm pulled out of a story because of something a character says or something that happens that just seems like it's nailing something over the head very ham-fistedly, that doesn't really have nuance or is being repetitive. I have a 3-time limit. If by the 3rd time this happens, I put down the book enough to say, I'm just not feeling it right now, then I'm gonna DNF it. And that kind of happened with this. I don't want to say exactly what happened because I will talk about it in my vlog, but there was just something in the present timeline that was used to really hammer home the point of the themes of the story that were being explored. I started to question who the audience was for this. You know, I think ideally the person who should pick this up is someone who is unfamiliar with the horrible things that have happened during the Spanish Inquisition. I think it should be someone who needs to be educated about the history of genocides of indigenous peoples of Central and Latin America. I'm someone who I'm looking for content that does talk about these things, but talks about them in a way that has a certain level of depth and causes us to think deeper about the ramifications without just throwing the ramification in my face, right? Let people come to that conclusion through the actions of the character more so than just telling them to their face. And that was the thing that kind of brought this down for me. But it was a thing that I read. I loved Blood Scion. I need to put out an independent review for this book. Oh my god. The second book is coming out in 2025 and I cannot wait to pre-order it. I had actually, as soon as I finished this, went online to see if I can get myself a copy of the second book and I found out it wasn't out. I was very disappointed. Blood Scion has renewed my hope in YA. So this is a really horrific story. I wouldn't even know to say that. I guess it's an analogy because it incorporates magic. Specifically, it's involving a character who is part of the Yoruba people in Africa. It's very clearly like a YA magical fantasy about the colonization of Africa and the presence of the white body in brown and black spaces. Our main character comes of age at the age of 15, and when the story opens, she's looking for her mom, who she doesn't know if her mom ran away or was killed or what happened. There is this empire that is run by a colonizing body of white people who have created the system of finding young people in the communities and the countries in which have been colonized to fight for their army, to be forced child soldiers. The things that they do to these children to break them to become a part of this army, I cried at least 3 times reading this book. I cried, sobbing. If something can make me cry, immediately gets close to a 5-star. It's going to be in the 4-star at least somewhere, but I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. What I did really like about what this author did was, in this case, which is very opposite from this, right? This is an adult. This is a YA. I think that it's important with YA books to sometimes have characters who say the thing that needs to be said, say the thing that is the moral quandary or the moral takeaway from the point of the story, because young people are building their critical thinking skills, right? Young people are being exposed to these things, and it's important that they see and hear both sides of a story from multiple points of view to be able to kind of compare and contrast, to decide what are moral values and how does one build a foundation for moral values, and what does it look like from someone who is going through something that is an experience that is different from theirs. So because this one was more direct in what it was saying that it was trying to do, I rated this higher. Now, my feelings about that completely differ with an adult book, with something that is categorized as adult fiction. Here's the difference between these two, right? This one, although it was still direct in saying exactly what it was trying to do, still had more nuance, because this one had characters saying how they were feeling about what was going on. This is how what's going on affects me. This is how it makes me feel. Here's why I feel like you, my opposition, are not able to grapple with the same things that I'm grappling with, and here's how the circumstances affect both of us differently. Whereas this one said like 2 or 3 lines that connected the story in the future to the story in the past, when it's like, other than historically the effects of this generational trauma, they shouldn't really be able to speak to each other's situations in the way that they did. It was just too direct, right? Here it makes sense. Characters going through similar circumstances and talking about the circumstances that they're both in. Characters not going through the same circumstances, divided by 500 years, that in my opinion didn't necessarily have anything to do with the scene in which they were said. I really hope that that makes sense, but if you want to talk about this, please feel free to talk about it in the comments with me. These two are erotic fictions that I read and absolutely loved. This one is Cosmic Kiss. It is book 1 in the Galactic Gems, and this is Cosmic Crush. It is book 2. Both of them are by Clio Evans, who has slowly become one of my favorite erotic authors. It's a burlesque alien monster romance series. I think there's supposed to be like 1 or 2 other ones that I can't wait to get my hands on. This one follows a polycule. This one follows a straight couple. I kind of liked this one more than this one. What I do love about this series is I love that the way that the author writes the characters and the way that they love each other, it's so wholesome. I need more wholesome erotic fiction and romance. Give me more male characters that absolutely worship the ground that their partner walks on, or even just each other, right? Because this one is a polycule. It's a male, female romance, and the way that they love each other but also love her and will do anything to protect her, to make sure that she's safe. Consensual, safe intimacy is everything, and that's why I love this series. The plot is okay. The plot is just like enough. I think the plot in here was more compelling than in this one. This one, the guy's like an outlaw in the very beginning. He like snatches her off stage, and this one, things happen at the show and then escalate into something else where she goes on a date with the 2 of them. Either way, great series. Cannot wait to pick up the next one. I think the next one might be male romance. And then if there's a book 4, which I really want there to be a book 4, because as far as I'm concerned, there's one other character who I really want to get a book, and I know that they're not in the 3rd one. So Clio Evans, please feed me. If you've read any of these and you want to talk about it, please drop something in the comments. I love talking to people about the books that I've read. I have a Ko-fi page and a Patreon down below where you can get extra content from me and support my channel. I post videos whenever I feel like it. Thanks for watching. Bye!
What's it making, Mr. Wonka? Mr. Wonka worked the factory.
In your wildest dreams, you put out the legend.